Joining us here at the National Civil Rights Museum at the Lorraine Motel. I am Tiffany Graham, Chief Marketing and Development Officer, and it is my pleasure to welcome you. Today, we gather to remember a tragic event and pay homage to a great man. 56 years ago, the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was cut short. A man who was the epitome of nonviolence was taken by an act of senseless violence. In contrast, we commemorate this day with a call for peace and the charge to act with compassion, integrity, and equity. We now continue our important work to endow the next generation with hope embedded in Dr. King's enduring legacy. Now I'd like to present to you our president of the National Civil Rights Museum, Dr. Russ Wigginton. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany. And as the place where Dr. King lost his life, as the place that's committed to honor and preserve the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., it is my honor to present Martin Luther King III and his wife, Andrea Waters King, to you on this very important, this very commemorative, this very special day. Mr. and Mrs. King.
Good morning. We are certainly honored and humbled to be at the Civil Rights Museum on this day that many memories are swirling around in my head. I obviously, after 56 years, this day comes every year. And I have to think about how the life of myself, my siblings, and my mom changed in just a few minutes. Because my mother lost a husband, my siblings and I lost a father. Perhaps the most traumatic incident in our lives. And the nation lost, in one sense, but perhaps gleaned and gained an understanding of a message and a movement that has transformed our nation and our world and continues to reverberate. Because Dad was not just a dreamer, he was a doer. And his team moved our nation in a very forward direction, which leads us to 56 years later, wondering why have we not moved further? I'm always asked in every January at the time we observe Dad's birthday, how far have we come in relationship to the dream? And I always end up saying that individuals have made substantial progress, but masses have still not moved much. And I could elaborate on that, but I won't for now. I would just say that we, as an organization, I'm the chairman of the board of the Drum Major Institute. My wife, Andrea, is the president. And realizing the dream is very real and must happen. But Dad and Mom taught us that it takes a few good human beings to bring about change. And the climate is very interesting and in one sense saddened at this particular moment. As I'm sad to be here a little today. I'm honored, but I'm also saddened because I keep going back. I was here, by the way, on April 8th, which was Monday. April 4th was a Thursday when my siblings and I were at home in Atlanta and watching the news at 7 o'clock our time, 6 o'clock your time, when it was flashed over the screens. And at that moment, obviously our hearts started beating very fast and our lives were changed forever. But on Monday, my mother made a decision to come here and lead a demonstration, which Dad was to have led, to create justice, dignity, and righteousness for sanitation workers who were being treated so badly. Now, Dad was not eulogized until April 9th. So the day before he was eulogized, Mom chose to bring my older sister, my late sister Yolanda, my late brother Dexter, and I. And I always will remember that day as well, just as I remembered many days during that experience. But what it said as I reflect backward is Mother had the capacity to understand that in spite of her grieving, her hurt, her disappointment, she chose to continue in the tradition. Now, I must say that wasn't the first time. She had always been there, but it showed her level of commitment. And it showed that she understood what our nation needed. So 56 years later, my wife and I run an organization that is still working to realize the dream, along with our daughter who's 16, almost 16 years old. Let me end this segment, and would like for my wife to share something, by saying that in one sense, it's a dark day. But the hope that we must continue to fuse is in this generation and generations yet unborn. This institution, the National Civil Rights Museum, is really doing a phenomenal job of sharing the history. It is said that a people that do not remember their history are doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. We live in a nation that is complicated, where history is being written out, excluded. That's not what democracy is supposed to be about. It's about inclusion. It's about understanding that everyone has a story that needs to be told. It's about understanding that when we work together, we are stronger and better. It's about maybe even understanding that it is stated that Dad, as one small aspect of his life, being a dreamer, in the physical sense, was destroyed, but the message can never be destroyed. And the work lives within all of us. Thank you.
Good afternoon. We stand here today truly with heavy hearts. We toured the museum together as a family with our daughter for the first time last summer. And at that time, we quickly realized that as painful as it is for us to be here, and it is very painful, but that there was no more important place for us to be on this day, this year, than at the National um, Civil Rights Museum. And it is our hope that at a time when it seems that we as a country, we as a society are really at not only a pivotal moment, but a very, very dark moment, that we knew that we had to be here today to rededicate ourselves and hopefully to point for the world the message of Martin Luther King Jr. He talked about in his last book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? And I think that all of us can agree that we've seen our fair share of chaos. And it's now time for us to not only make real the dream, but to come together in community. You know, he said in his last speech on April 3rd that he would not or may not get there with us, but that he knew in his heart that we as a people would get to the promised land. And one of the things that we talk a lot about is we give people the story of a little girl that came to her grandmother and said, you know, grandmother, there are these two wolves inside of me, and they're at odds, and I'm really not sure which one will win because one is full of anger and chaos and meanness and division and jealousy. But there's this other wolf that's full of love and nobleness and compassion and justice. But I feel like they're at war within me, and I'm not sure which one was going to win. Can you please help me? And her grandmother said, it's the wolf that you feed. And we're here today to say that it's time that we as a nation feed the wolf of Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King, that we feed the wolf of peace and justice and equity, that we make real the promises of democracy. And so we're here in that spirit to remind America of not only a dream, but a man. And we're asking for us all to stand together, to walk together, to continue his work together, to make real his dream in the beloved community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. and Ms. King. And if there are any questions for them.
I'm curious about when you look at activism from a very personal level from your childhood and the activism that you're involved in today, what stands out to you? What is similar to 56 years ago in terms of activism and the approach, and what's different between the two types?
You know, I'm not really sure. The major difference is technology. The strategies and the approaches that Dad and his team used are still applicable today. Technology in theory should give us a much more significant manner to execute. What I mean by that is, you know, during the major demonstrations when people were trained, they went to freedom schools, they were trained in nonviolence. From Dad would participate, Rosa Parks, many of us, Dr. Abinet, the list goes on and on. There were some who couldn't engage in nonviolence. And so they were encouraged not to participate, even as early as the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955. There were a document that was developed that gives all of the ways that we should conduct ourselves. And people embrace that. Now, what I'm saying today is through technology, I mean, when you think about the Dad and his team and Mom, they had a mimeograph machine, but they had a whole lot of people a large number of them women who were actually doing the work, making sure this material got out to the community, making sure they talked about it and spread it. Today, we should be able to just push a button, but you got to create an example of how you engage. One of the things that good, bad, or indifferent exist in our society that we have not yet figured out how to create is this real unity. Unity comes momentarily. We sort of, as a nation, even kind of unified at the tragic death of George Floyd. How do you sustain, is the question, this unity so that the nation can move forward? For about a year, about a year, we made great strides. DEI departments were put together. Resources were made available to organizations. And my father used to say that whenever you have a victory, there's always the inevitable pushback. And what I mean by that? After the Great March on Washington in 1963, 250,000 people coming together, very diverse crowd, labor, religious leaders, this big 6, 7 civil rights organizations, Black, white, Native American, Latino, Hispanic American, all Americans coming together. Less than 2 weeks after the Great March on Washington, the 16th Street Baptist Church was bombed and 4 little girls lost their lives. That pushback. Now, George Floyd, tragically, for a year, things happened. Then about the 11th or 12th month, this inevitable pushback emerged. All of a sudden, resources will begin to be cut. Diversity, equity, inclusion, which really is the backdrop of why we are really a great nation. Not great again, because I'm not sure what that means. But we are a great nation. However, when you exclude people, democracy is not supposed, it's about inclusion. So you exclude in history, you are excluding a number of areas where historically people have been able to participate. And last year, on August, we observed the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington. Pushback because of how times have changed. That same day, which was August 26th, the day, 28th is the date, but we did it on a Saturday last year. And while we were completing our march, there was a terrorist action, actually a racist action, where a white guy who had a swastika on his gun went into a Black neighborhood, initially to an African-American college in Jacksonville, Florida, and killed 4 Black people. Pushed back immediately because technology gives instant information. What we were doing was seen instantly. And it did not resonate, obviously, with this person. So he chose to do that. All I'm saying is we have to create a different climate and use everything at our disposal, every piece of technology. And we have to figure out, how do we transform these evil acts into positive energy that can change our communities and our nation and really make it better for all. I know, honey, you wanted to.
Well, I would also answer that with your words about the little boy named Tommy that he did a report on. They were assigned to do a report on their pet. So he did a report on his pet dog, and he turned it in to the teacher. Was very excited, and when he got his report back, he got an F, and he couldn't understand why. And so he asked the teacher. He was like, "Well, this is a great report about our dog. I did the assignment." And she said, "Well, you forgot I had your brother a few years ago." And the problem is that he did the same report on the dog. And Tommy thought about it for a moment. He said, "But it's the same dog." And I think right now we are facing the same dog, the same issues that Martin Luther King talked about, the triple evils of racism and bigotry, of violence and poverty. Those are what he coined the triple evils. Those 3 things, I think, of our biggest problems right now. And we believe through our work is embracing peace, justice, and equity. is acknowledging groups that are on the ground, which we have done with grants today, that are Black and Brown led groups that are working on issues of democracy, working on building the beloved community. It's through what we are, our 5-year initiative, where we are igniting a movement with young people called Realize the Dream, where one, by Dr. King's birthday of 2029, we will have collectively completed 100 million hours of service all over this country. Can you imagine that? Kids coming together, standing together, not focusing on their differences, but focusing on how we all together can create and make real the dream of Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King. So those are the issues we're facing. And those are just a couple of the ways in which we as an organization and our family are working to address those.
Thank you all. We are need to end right now, but there may be opportunity to chat with them individually. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here.
This concludes our media briefing, but we invite everyone to join us today at 4 o'clock in person and also virtual on our virtual platforms of the National Civil Rights Museum website, civilrightsmuseum.org, Facebook, and YouTube for the Remembering MLK commemoration. So we will see you today at 4 o'clock. Thank you.
Yes.